Hey, friends, and welcome to Self Meets Soul, a podcast where we discuss how to discover what sets your soul on fire and modern ways to integrate spirituality into your daily life. My name is Juliana, and today's episode is for the girls and the gays. So we're going to be chatting about how to really tap in and awaken the wild woman within. Now, I'm sure there are workshops and more of like a solid definition about what the wild woman is, but today we'll really simplify it. When I think of the wild woman within, I think about the all-encompassing masculine and feminine energy that every woman holds within her. When society thinks about and labels females, it tends to be like, oh, super soft-spoken, nice, gentle, peaceful, light. Now, this is totally the reality of a lot of women, but even with those really quiet girls you might know and be thinking about, there is a wild woman within them and within all of us. If you've heard the phrase, there is nothing more powerful than a woman's scorn or female rage, you know exactly what I mean. I even saw this video compilation on Twitter about like a woman's anger and power, and it was all these incredible actresses like screaming or crying in this like guttural sense. If you've seen Marriage Story, like Scarlett Johansson in that, Mia Goth in Pearl, or Toni Collette in Hereditary, really good examples of, that female power. But while the wild woman within doesn't just have to be about female rage, it's also about power. Women literally creating life and bringing it onto this planet, right? There is a fire, a power, a strength within all of us that yearns to be free and able to fully express itself without societal limitations or judgments. Our guest today is quite literally the perfect embodiment of this. In this episode, Gabriella Corsino will talk about her experiences growing up with creativity, expression, spirituality, and how she embodies her divine feminine energy in all aspects of her life. Gabriella and I met through Bumble BFF, and the first time she walked into my yoga studio, she just lit up the whole room. I love telling people about this. She is a sweet, sensitive, caring, and gentle soul, but she is also passionate, fiery, and empowered. Gabriella is a current doctorate student of psychology and yoga teacher. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
Thanks for coming. Before we get into today's topic, I want to know, what is something that lights up your soul?
So many things. Well, I definitely have to say community and sharing conversations and energy with others that have that open heart and vulnerability makes me I feel like I get a high from just like leaving those conversations, because the first time we met, for example, we were talking at a coffee shop for hours and being so open and vulnerable. And, we both said like, usually we don't share this much and open up this
literally
much
crying.
trauma dump, crying on a first meeting. But it was something about that energy exchange that we were having that just allowed for an open heart, and it made me so happy. So having that with community is definitely something that sets my soul on fire, and so much more. I mean, I think yoga, we have that shared passion, and yoga certainly, brings that attunement to the joy that can come from movement, and even experiencing some ecstatic dance and whatnot together. That movement and self-expression. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. So we'll get started here. Tell me about your academic journey and how you developed a passion for psychology, because that's a big part of, this part of you today, I would say.
For sure. So growing up, I went to a performing arts international boarding school called Walnut Hill School for the Arts. It was about 45 minutes from my hometown outside of Boston. And so I got a scholarship to go for musical theater. And so for 4 years, I moved out of the house at 18 and lived there at boarding school. It was certainly a very open-minded community. Of course, the arts have a very queer and usually open-minded perspective. And so about like 40% of the school was queer. 30% was from Asia and some other countries as well. So it really exposed me to different people and different mindsets, because my hometown prior was not the most open-minded. And so I learned a lot about, the arts and musical theater and got some really amazing training and thought I wanted to be on Broadway, do musical theater as my full-time job.
Which you totally could be. After hearing that video of you singing, I was like, this is crazy. So maybe don't give up on that ever.
Oh my God.
Maybe your side gig. Do people have Broadway as a side hustle? I don't know.
Oh, I miss it. And I think like the root of what music and dance and acting, what musical theater is, the root of it is beautiful, but sometimes the politics of musical theater and everything that goes along with like the business side of it makes it a bit more rigid. But yeah, so that's what I did for my high school experience. And then I went to a couple of different schools for undergrad. I started off at Boston Conservatory at Berklee School of Music, majoring in musical theater, doing exactly what I was doing in high school. Had a huge awakening in terms of I can't do musical theater anymore. It is not allowing me to grow. And the idea of being a starving artist, we can't all
right.
be Idina Menzel or, Renee Rapp. We can't all, that's the 1% or less.
Right.
And so musical theater, when you're a screen actor, they even get paid more, but stage actors make nothing. And growing up in the financial circumstances that I did, I just had so much anxiety about that. And the oh,
no, did it get you?
that. So,
anyways,
I see it. Go.
I'm telling you, I think it's that plant.
Oh goodness, where was I? Yeah, so for a lot of reasons as well, in terms of like mental health things that were coming up in the world of, musical theater, having your body, your vessel be your job, it was becoming very toxic in terms of my eating disorder at the time. And so I knew that I had to leave the world of musical theater to be able to recover and be able to, develop into something more. And so I left and went to a couple different schools, ended up graduating from Chapman University. Not the greatest.
She's like, we don't love that alma mater,
but yeah, then started at Northern Arizona University this past year. I'm just finishing up my first year in a Doctor of Clinical Psychology program. So I'm on track to becoming a psychologist in about 4 years.
4 short years.
4 more years.
She's so close. And is there a I know it's kind of early, I guess, but is there like a population or a focus that you are like really passionate about in terms of getting into the field?
Yeah, for sure. So 2 of the major things that you can focus on in the field of psychology are assessment or therapy. But there's so many other things you can do, like consulting and more. So I'm more passionate about being a therapist, and, going to give talks at schools and whatnot. My area of focus is definitely changing. I went into school with just wanting to work with eating disorders, and over some time, I've definitely developed a passion and just didn't even really fully know that this was a job at first going into this program, but you can be a yoga therapist as a psychologist
I did not know
and do
this.
experiential therapy. And it's very different than a traditional yoga class. It's yoga therapy. So you have an assessment, like an intake assessment, like your first therapy appointment. You have a treatment plan. You have specific things that you're, doing with your therapist. It might be in a group format or an individual, but it is an experiential way to process emotions and let those emotions come up and reprocess them. Um, and that's what we do in therapy, but it's just a more hands-on way. And so, learning that's an option, it definitely made me excited because of
Yeah.
my love for yoga.
That's cool. I didn't know that existed.
Yeah.
That would be perfect because I also feel like there's probably not that much, like it's not a heavily populated field. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure not many people specialize it compared to like
Mhm.
some of the more traditional ones, you know.
Yeah, definitely more niche. So, of course, like there's other therapeutic modalities that I'd love to learn for traditional talk therapy. But one of the great things about the field of psychology, there's so many ways you can go. And so I kind of want to try it all.
That will be good. I can see that for you. So, how did you get into your spiritual journey? You kind of touched about how yoga is really important to you, gave us a little background on how, you grew up and your academic journey, but how did you get into spirituality?
Yeah. Growing up, I was raised Roman Catholic, but didn't really connect to it over the years, seeing at least within my community growing up, some hypocrisy and just people not being actually spiritually connected and not happy. And so in undergrad, when I was going through my eating disorder, I was looking for a form of healing because at the time I wasn't seeing like a Western therapist. I wasn't going to talk therapy and connected to the philosophy of Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
And so a friend at the time exposed me to Nichiren Buddhism, and I started going to some groups in Boston. And then from there, just started doing a little bit of research on my own. And during COVID, became aware of Ram Dass, who was a psychologist and went to India to test these psychedelics and, realized that, oh, psychedelics let you come down after. But when he tested the psychedelics on the guru and the guru wasn't affected, he realized, oh, this guru is always high. That's why he's not
Yeah,
affected.
right.
So I need to get whatever you're on.
Yeah.
And it was meditation, and the spiritual practices that were from that lineage. And so he brought those teachings from his guru back to the US, and from there he has like a very big community. He was big during the hippie era, and so learning a lot through him. He was also on Midnight Gospel, that show on Netflix that was aired during
Wait,
COVID.
was he really?
I believe he was on it. If he wasn't, then I also use that as a resource because each episode they had like different people.
Yes, that
Yeah.
show is like crazy. I actually need to like sit down and watch it and really listen because
Yeah.
I think I did that with one episode and I was like, where did I? There's just so much going on there.
Yeah. And since it's cartoons, you don't really expect it to be this deep philosophical show.
Mm-hmm.
When I first saw it, I was like, I don't want to watch cartoons,
Yeah.
like I'm not interested. But then when I actually started listening, I was like, oh, wow. And then researching who these people were that were guests on each show, and they're like Buddhist scholars and just like magic practitioners, which is like an esoteric form of spirituality. And so there's so many. Yeah, that was definitely a very eye-opening show who exposed me to.
That's
That
cool.
exposed me to a lot, yeah.
That's awesome. And with your spiritual journey, do you really feel like this is something that you try to like tap into and grow into? Is it something that's very like ever present in your life?
It's certainly an evolution that affects my everyday for sure. There's certain days where I tap into it more than others,
Right.
but I'm very aware that this is a forever
Journey,
journey. You know, like
yeah.
this is. There's no end. You can't graduate from to your spiritual practices.
Right.
You can't graduate from therapy either. So, there's certain days where I feel the need or feel called to meditate. There's other days that I feel called to do yoga. We've done like sound healing and cacao and ecstatic dance. There's so many different forms, and so I'm grateful to have that as a toolbox and in breath work and whatnot. I think over the years, just becoming more attuned to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I remember years ago, I would hold my breath driving at times just from some anxiety I was dealing with. But honestly, having that increased awareness from this practice we do has completely changed my life and my ability to regulate my emotions, to use my breath, and not get as stressed out about things, So it's certainly an everyday practice in the sense of, you're always able to be aware of yourself and
Right.
use these skills and tools to turn inward and,
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. I feel the same way about like how it's helped me tap into things. And as far as like the creative arts and who you are today in your spirituality, or just like, even outside of that, how did the creative arts kind of shape you into that? Because you did go to these schools that were like, performance arts based, which I honestly feel like not many people can relate to. I feel like I don't actually know anyone who went to performing arts schools. Yeah. So how did that shape your character and your passions today?
Yeah, it was very rigid. We had a couple of academic classes in the mornings at my boarding school for high school, and then arts for the rest of the day. And they did not foster love. They did not foster community or friendship or supporting one another. They tried to replicate basically Juilliard and the industry, which is very cutthroat.
Interesting.
And so our friendships were like friends, but also competitors.
Yeah, but also like keep one eye open because she's coming for that role.
Yeah. It wasn't the healthiest environment by any means. So we had ballet, opera, classical instruments, visual art. They made a videography and writing major as I was there, and then musical theater. And so, as you can imagine, the classical music and opera world is very rigid, as well as ballet, very rigid. It's not contemporary dance. This is not modern dance. This is ballet. And, all of the stereotypes that come from,
That was so weird.
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first. Is that my phone?
I think so, because is yours over there?
Yeah.
That was so weird. It was a little scary.
What does that mean?
I don't know. We're just gonna ignore that.
Okay, well. It definitely taught me how to be disciplined, but to a fault. I was so rigid, so type A, but I also was not mentally well because they expected 13-year-olds to be like robots and not need nurturing and community and love, and it wasn't healthy. And so it kind of made me lose that passion for the arts, because I saw the bad side of it, the rigid side, the side that wasn't freeing. And what I did love was that freeing feeling when you were on stage, when you were like singing that high note and you were getting all of those endorphins from it. And when you were dancing and you were, and the lights are on you and you were feeling that energy of the lights and all of that is why I loved it. But it just died over time by the rigidity. And it was funny in my um, therapy course just yesterday, actually, my professor was talking about jazz versus classical music. So, jazz, you never really know what's going to happen. It might, end up sounding like this in the performance, or it might end up sounding like that because it's not a rigid, structured preparation in your, piece that you're going to perform. Whereas in classical music, you practice your own part and then you conjoin all the parts together and you have your symphony, and it's rigid. You know what's going to be performed in that symphony because it's a set structure, it's rigid. And I think I gravitated towards spirituality and, outside of that rigidity of musical theater and the arts that I knew of, because I was looking for some freedom. I was looking to get out of that rigidity because I sensed that this is not healthy. There has to be more. This isn't truthful. This isn't honest. We're not supposed to be operating like robots.
Right, totally. And that makes so much sense too with like, these even like societal expectations about like how people should act, how women should act, and being told, this is the way that you respond, this is how you react when a man approaches you, like stay within this bubble, this box, follow the rules, follow the structure, and you'll be fine. But like it's against our nature in a way to want to stay like that. Like there's always going to be something within us that's craving for more and that freedom. That's why like a lot of the times I feel like I've seen on TV or like with people be like, when someone tells me what to do, I want to do the exact opposite. And it's just this sense of like, why are you trying to restrict me? Why are you trying to control me? Like I'm meant to be free and express myself, which is why like when you were on stage, it probably did feel that way, right? Like you did feel more free because you were, getting into the motions and you were expressing yourself. Or with ecstatic dance, like you're just really feeling it instead of like worrying about the tempo or the counts,
Oh yeah. It's so liberating when there's no rules. And so I think something I've been learning over the years is challenge those societal rules, like you said. Because if society says those are the rules, or if other people in your environment have expectations for you, like you need to be married by 30 or something like that, or you need to have kids, you can't not want to have kids, or you need to be, heterosexual. All of these things, if they're not honest and allowing your free expression, whatever that is to you, it's not authentic to you, you're going to probably be a very unhappy and robotic person.
Right. It's unnatural. It won't feel right. Definitely. So moving on then, what does the divine feminine mean to you? Yeah. And I feel like there's so many definitions with this. And I personally feel like I've never found like, I don't know, like if there's like a standard definition. So I kind of feel like it just really depends on the person. So for you, what does it mean for you?
Yeah, I love that you said it. It's really person to person, because I agree. I don't think there is one definition. But to me, the divine feminine is that part of us that is innately there, that is yearning to be let out, that part of us that's in touch with our intuition, the part of us that is in touch with a higher power, the universe, and that part of ourself, the divine, the universe, the higher power within us. It's not this thing that's up there, we have a part of that, a light, a part of that light within us. The way that we want to grow and self-actualize is certainly a part of the divine feminine. And the way that we express ourselves in our energy through a feminine lens, you know, and feminine self-expression. And so all of the things that I've said prior, you know, didn't say the word feminine. So I think all of that is true of the divine masculine, right? And then that just change and adjustment at the end for the divine masculine. So it's expressing that divine nature within all of us, but with a masculine energy.
Definitely, yeah. I feel like also when I think of the divine feminine, I think a lot about that energy that you feel with like other women, like being in conversation and being in community with other women, and how like that. I can't remember what the name. It wasn't like the rose something thing we went to at Urban. Yeah. I can't remember the official name for it, but that ceremony that we went to where we did like some ecstatic dancing and it was just like us in this room full of women. It's so liberating because I think a lot of the time we're under this watchful eye from the masculine, right? Like we're kind of changing how we are, responding to our environments, always also like a little bit on edge to maintain our own safety in the world in general. And so I feel like when in that moment too, like when you are within a room full of women, like you can just feel like the divine feminine present and that energy and the comfort and the safety. And just even if something as simple as like when you're out at the club and you go in the bathroom and like the girls are like, oh my God, you're so cute, I love your outfit. Like, just even little moments like that is just so telling of that like feminine energy that is so strong, I feel like.
Oh yeah. Something you said about, you know, when we're not around men, or when we don't have that, you know, masculine perspective, like looking over us, watching us. I feel like the male gaze, you know, being so keen to, you know, prioritizing how these women look, and you know, we have higher expectations as women on how we need to look than how men look, you know? And so I feel like the male gaze makes women sometimes be more competitive with one another. So when you take guys out of the picture, and you're surrounded by fellow sisters, like that is the environment where we no longer need to compete. You know, we are one and the same, and you know, we're here to support each other, and we're here to heal together, and to open and to keep our heart open, to be vulnerable and to process emotions, and to grow, to self-actualize, and it is a really powerful thing when we have that.
Definitely. I love moments like that. And kind of going more into that. So the divine feminine is, you know, that energy that we all tap into, or, you know, strive to tap into, keeping that balance with the masculine. And that sometimes, again, like I kind of mentioned in the intro, can be equated with really being soft. And that is definitely part of the divine feminine. But I also think that that passion that we have, like you mentioned, the intuition is a part of that wild woman within us. So what are some of the ways that you embrace that wild woman energy?
I think questioning what my values and morals are, instead of adhering to whatever society says it should be, is a way to align with my own truth, and that truth is liberating. That truth doesn't have to be put in a box. That truth can be wild, and I think that there's a lot of healing that we do need to do before we can fully let that wild woman out. Um, Life, creates these bricks that are stacked on top of each other over time. As a child, we're born without them in most circumstances, unless you're, experiencing trauma at like an infant stage. And so when these obstacles come our way and these bricks add up, our heart becomes more closed. Mm-hmm. And we're becoming farther detached from who we are, like our authentic selves, our truth. And we do have to break down those walls and be vulnerable and let those emotions come up. We can't process the emotions if we don't tap into them.
Right.
So, when we go to therapy or when we go to a yoga class, if we're going in with a closed heart and not allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, no work is going to really be able to be had, at least not very much. Mm-hmm. And so we have to first we have to allow ourselves to tap into that vulnerability, to tap into some of those feelings, some of those traumas, some of those negative emotions that we still store in our bodies and store in our hearts, and take whatever action that calls to you. For some people, that's going to therapy. For some people, that's going to more spiritual circles. Everyone has a different way of healing and processing emotions. And I think that's the first step in order to just start to touch what that wild woman is. And from there, it's limitless in terms of like how far you can go.
Right. That was greatly said. And so you mentioned also, kind of like questioning society's like norms and boxes that, we try to put ourselves into. So tell me more about your experience in awakening as a woman in the queer community, because, yes, no one should ever deny that, like, this is a decision you make, really, but it's always there, but how did you really like come to terms with like, oh, I think this is like what I like, and I think this is what I identify with? Like, how was your experience with that?
Yeah. I mean, growing up, I didn't really see very many queer people before I went to high school. And, it wasn't very talked about very much. And no one ever said, it's okay, And so I didn't come out until college. But, my sexuality has evolved over time because as I've also gone further into my spiritual journey, I've learned that I'm attracted to energies, and energies can be more masculine or more feminine or mixes of both, balance between the two. And it doesn't matter to me like what someone's gender or lack thereov is. Doesn't matter what genitalia anyone's got going on. Like, it's
she loves energy. Them all, folks. Right. It's their energy. Like, it's so weak. Like, who they are to their core, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And was that hard for you to come to terms with, or did you feel anxious at all about being like, this is how like I identify?
Yeah. I think it took me a while to come out publicly because I was feeling like once I came out publicly, that it was going to be a set in stone thing and it could never change. But something I wish I could tell a younger version of myself is nothing is ever final. Mm-hmm. We are changing every single day. So if I evolved and my sexuality changed again, that's okay. It doesn't need to be this, label that you put on yourself and it needs to stay that way forever. and, you know, to relieve some of that pressure of, okay, like I have to make this decision, because there is no decision to be made. It's tapping into your authentic self and your truth. If I'm attracted to energy, regardless of, gender, it's there's nothing to. I don't even need to use a label, but I do choose to use a label, being pansexual, and so, yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Well, thank you. And you mentioned kind of energies, and so you can be, maybe attracted to more masculine energies or feminine energies or a mixture of both. And a lot of the time, I would argue that for every individual, it's important to maintain that balance of both. Because if you are too in your masculine, you'll hear about the girls who are too in their masculine. They don't let the guy do anything for them and blah, 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 which I have my whole opinion on that and about why girls feel the need to do that nowadays. Yeah. But they're too in their masculine. They're girl bossing too hard, or they're too in their feminine. She's not independent enough. She doesn't need a man to do that. Why can't she realize that? And I do believe that there is an issue with being too much in one, because then you don't have that balance, and then other things might be off in other areas of your life. So how can someone, in your opinion, maintain that balance between having both the masculine and feminine energy, tapping into both?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I loved how you brought up some examples of, some people that do tend to be in one, side of the coin or the other. But that balance is hard to attain. Perfect balance doesn't exist. And so it's certainly hard, but we should strive for that balance. And I think when we become more aware of our own energies and our own behaviors, and attuned to moments, sometimes when I'm driving, I feel like I'm really in my masculine for some reason.
Interesting.
The way that I sit and everything.
She's in her Audi SUV high up on the
road. I don't know if I'm just not defensive, but just feeling something about driving to me just feels strong and masculine.
I would agree, yeah.
And there's other energies where I feel like I tap into more feminine, and at times and places where it's appropriate, right? But I don't think I really started picking up on that weird sensation of oh, I kind of feel like I'm in my masculine when I'm driving until a year or so ago. And I don't even know how that fully came to be, or the first exact time where I had that intuitive thought. But at the end of the day, just the longer that I've been going on this spiritual path, it teaches you to be more in tune with yourself. And so, I think you'll be able to make choices and try to find that balance, that middle ground, the more that you become sensitive to, what you're feeling in that moment. But you don't need to be balanced in every moment,
Right, exactly.
Allowing yourself to, if you want to play sports and really dive into that masculine, aggressive energy, that is a great way to let out that kind of energy. You don't have to be perfectly balanced in that moment, So I think of balance in terms of at specific times and scenarios, in our life, just flowing back and forth.
Definitely, yeah. And I feel like I see that within both of us, in how when it comes to school and when it comes to work, that is more so where we're in our masculine, because we're taking charge of what it is that we want. We're focused on our deadlines and all that stuff, and we're taking initiative. But then maybe with our partners is when we soften a bit, and then we kind of, okay, I'm kind of going to let, at least for me, I let him take care of me in those moments. That's what I tend to do with partners because I'm so busy girl bossing all day that when I do come home.
Yes, you are.
But when I do come home at the end of the day, I just want to be baby, you know?
Yes.
Right. So I feel like sometimes it even, like, definitely, like you said, it fluctuates depending on the situation. And, you know, sometimes our body and our actions naturally leans towards one energy after maybe we've been spending a lot of time in one. Then we'll start to find ourselves wanting to, you know, lean into the other one.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely agree. I definitely tend to go into more of the feminine energy in romantic relationships.
Yeah.
And, you know, even gravitating towards more masculine energies romantically to find that balance, you know, between the two.
Definitely.
You know.
Yeah, definitely important. And something that you do really well, that in terms of the wild woman, like I feel like I have this energy, but my issue is that I cannot rein it in sometimes. Like sometimes it's like that wild woman is like unleashed and it's like, okay, but now you've like caused some damage, you know, like either to others or to myself. And I was talking about that situation with that one friend to my therapist yesterday, and I was telling her how when I was responding, I paused, which was something we've been working on, and I thought about you and how you would act in that situation and how you would respond. And she was like, I'm so glad that you have someone in your life that like you see as this like role model of how to react in situations where you're not happy or you're mad about something. So my question for you is, how are you able to keep like your soul soft and just react the way that you do to things in times of frustration?
Well, I don't think I was always this way. I definitely was more reactive younger. Over the years, I've kind of became this peacemaker. You know, that's become my personality. And sometimes to a fault. Sometimes the peacemaker, you know, doesn't want to disrupt the peace so much that it might be hard to start a conversation for me that, you know, could potentially lead to the other person not, you know, some awkwardness if they don't take it well, you know. But those conversations that I do have that are uncomfortable, I go into those conversations with grace because I had a conflict recently that taught me a lot about how to have peaceful conversation that is productive at the same time. And I've learned that there needs to be validation before explaining or understanding and logic is used. Validation is tapping into the heart space first so that we can start off this conversation with an open heart. I understand what you're feeling and I'm sorry, or I'm sorry you felt, you know, like acknowledging and empathizing for what that person is feeling, you know. And since I've, you know, made that realization, I've used it in another conversation and it worked again, you know, like that when I said, like, I understand like what you might have been going through. This is how I was feeling. And, you know, that person was someone that was certainly a defensive person in their nature. And I was surprised that they took it well. And this was like all like over Instagram DM too, which was like, you can't really feel the energy of the person when there's just like two DM exchanges. But what was the question?
You answered it. Yeah, you answered it. How like you keep yourself soft in those moments. So you come from that that validation first. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so you knowing that the heart needs to be open in
Yeah.
order for that conversation to be productive, which
Yeah.
it is true. Like, I tried that approach with someone who is super defensive, and I was like shaking because I was so pissed. And it's like not in my nature to not react. I am a reactive person, and I know that is a big fault of mine. Like, that's what I've been working on. And when I thought of you and responded how I thought you would have responded, I was met with an apology. I was met with, oh, like, I was met with understanding.
Yeah.
And that, like, just showed me, they really opened my eyes, like, wow, like, this is something that I want to achieve. So the fact that you said you weren't always like that gives me hope, because it's not hopeless, folks. The rest of us people who just are ready to pop off, we can do it. We can do it. Yeah.
It's so funny because I don't even see you as a very reactive person. I do see you as a gentle person that can be strong when you turn it on and when you want to turn it on. But
well, I would never even like react like that with you, so you probably will never see it. Because how can anyone, in my brain, I'm like, anyone who has conflict with you, like, they're in the wrong.
No.
Like, that's my thought immediately. So, but yeah. Well, thanks. That's helpful, and that is really something that I think will be good to think about, like, moving forward. That validating them first, definitely.
Yeah.
So, what message do you have for people who might be nervous or just like don't know how to tap into their fullest and most authentic expression? Maybe because they're afraid of judgment, or they just like don't, it's just scary to them, that thought of like releasing that wild woman and tapping into what really feels right for them. What kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah. That fear of what others might think about that version of yourself that is that authentic self that is inside of you waiting to be unleashed. That judgment that you're self-imposing of worrying what others may think is crippling. And I know people that worry so much about what others think to the extent that they are crippled by it. I unfortunately think that sometimes something really big needs to happen to break that cycle.
You're so right.
And break that perspective, because everyone has a different perspective. No two people are going to have the exact same perspective in the exact same life circumstances and upbringing, and so many things shape our perspective, and our morals shape our perspective as well. And if you're seeing the world going through your everyday, worrying about what others are thinking, oh, like at the grocery store, like I did this, like I wonder if that person thinks blah, 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 or I was wearing this, like I wonder if they think this is weird, or like so many different interactions you could be self-conscious and worry about judgment from others. But you have a choice, you have a choice on what you're prioritizing. If you're prioritizing what other people think rather than what you think, that's unfortunately like the world you're going to live in, and it's not going to be authentically you. And so once you're ready to make that choice and just not care what others think, I think that's the start of a beautiful evolution into just learning who you are.
Definitely.
And learning what that authentic self may be. And I think over time, as you're learning about who you are, you embody it,
Totally. Definitely is going to be freeing. Like, you can't live happily. You can't have that actual life that you want, that you dream of, until you shed that fear of what other people think and just let the ego go a little bit. The ego is there to protect you from from judgment, because back, in early times, like, you had to be accepted by everyone, because then, that would mean you wouldn't get food, like back in the, caveman times and stuff like that. But we're not in that anymore. And it's, the ego is having you worry so much about others in order to protect you, so that you can feel like you have a community, feel like you have support, and you will have those support from the right people. If someone judges you for going into your authentic expression and, doesn't support you in that, then that's very telling about them. And that's just the universe showing you, like, this person wasn't meant to be in your life. Look at all these other people who will empower you to dive into that expression.
Yeah. Even just seeing like how much you've grown in your spiritual practice, and posting like you doing your tarot or doing your sound bowl or whatnot, that just shows that you've freed yourself of judgment from others, because anyone can go on your Instagram and see what you've posted, and they can say like, oh, like if you're a therapist, you're a quack, or if you're spiritual, like you're a hippie, or you're blah blah blah, and judge it, but you don't care. And that's amazing that you're just your authentic self, expressing your passions, your spirituality, and I'm proud of you for doing that.
Thank you. Remember, it's your life, boo. No one is living it. No one is stuck in your body or in your head but you. So make it somewhere that you want to be and you're proud to be in.
Yes.
Definitely. Well, thanks so much again, Gabriella, for being on the show.
Thank you.
Where can the listeners find you on socials?
On socials, my Instagram is gabriella.ambra.c. And follow me there.
Cool. I will be sure to put that in the episode notes. Well, that is all that I have for you today, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. If you like this episode, be sure to leave a review and share this podcast. You never know who in your life might resonate with it. Chat with you later. Great.